question 6, we've got a little bit of a theory question, and normally there is one theory in there for anybody who wants to have a go at it. So it's not all numbers on this paper. And this theory question is about the badges of trade. So by reference to the badges of trade and subsequent judgment, discuss whether you think the profit from the sale of the property should be considered for trading income. So if you cast your mind back to when we did self-employment, we looked at how the badges of trade work. So if a business doesn't know whether it's trading or not, it uses these badges of trade. So a good thing to start this question would be to sort of brainstorm yourself and think, well, what are the badges of trade? And jot them down on your answer sheets, and then you can try and relate them to the scenario as you go along. So a bit of a brainstorming. So badges of trade, we had the subject matter. We've got length of ownership. Frequency of transactions. Circumstances of sale. Supplementary work. And then you've got the profit motive. And there are other things that you can look at, but those are the main 6. It's if you can see anything else that suggest in the reading, but these are the main 6 that the HMRC use. So subject matter is all to do with, is the nature of the transaction suggesting that you would have to be trading? So the example we used in class was that toilet roll case. So somebody sold 1 million toilet rolls, which sort of suggests that the person is probably trading, because why would anybody buy that many toilet rolls unless they intended to make some money out of it? So if we go and have a look at what's going on up here, Colin is a bricklayer, works for lots of different builders, and him and his wife decide to buy a house. They get it cheap because it needs lots of repairs before anybody can live in it. In order to buy it, they've used some savings and they've used a bank loan. They then spend another 32,000 doing the property up, giving you some detail there, what they do, fitting a kitchen, carpets, etc. They did most of the work themselves, and then they sell it for 160. So you can see they are going to make quite a big profit out of it. I know they've got some costs and they've got the time that was involved, but they're nevertheless going to make a profit. The question is, do they need to pay tax on that? And it finishes off by saying, at no time did Sue or Colin live in the house. They've always lived somewhere else. Well, there's nothing there to suggest that the transaction that's taking place is particularly unusual. You know, people buy and sell houses and do them up all the time. It's not like the oddity of the toilet roll case. So I wouldn't say there's anything there in the subject matter. But length of ownership, this rule says the shorter the period of time you own something, the more likely it is that you're trading. So I'd link this to the scenario and say here that they bought the property in August 17 and they sold it in June 18. So August 17 to June 18. So it's owned for less than 12 months. So that would indicate that they was suggesting they were going to trade. They never had any intention to keep it. They were always going to, you know, sell it on and try and make some money out of it. Frequency of transactions suggests the more times you do something, the more likely you're trading. But it doesn't really tell us here, does it, whether Colin's done this before? It says he's a bricklayer and he says he works for lots of different people, but there's no suggestion that this is the first time he's done this with his wife, where they've bought something and done it together, or whether they've done it lots of times. So we've got to say that there's no concrete evidence on that one. Circumstances of sale. What was the intention? Did they ever plan to sell this, or was they using it for personal benefit? Well, it says here, at no time did they live in it. They'd got their own property, so there was no intention, was there, to keep, from what we can see. So they always intended to sell. from what we can see. Supplementary work, all right, did they do any extra work for personal benefits, or was the extra work always done with the intention to make a profit? Well, it looks like that is the case, isn't it? Because they deliberately bought it cheap. When they bought it, they knew it needed a lot of work doing on it before anybody could live in it. And they spent all this money on bathrooms and kitchens and so on. So the personal enjoyment was never there. So yeah, they did do some supplementary work. And we can say that there was no personal enjoyment from that. And the final thing, was the profit motive? Well, again, it doesn't use the words profit, does it? But it does tell you that he knew he was getting it cheap compared to all the other houses. And the fact that he never intended to actually live in it. The fact that he's done all the work himself, so he was doing the work cheaper than he would if he was paying someone else to come and do it. To me, it suggests that there was a profit motive. So just looking at the badges of trade, I would say on the whole, yes, it's a trade, and therefore he should pay tax on the profit. Remember, you don't have to have all of the badges of trade. What you're trying to do is build a case to suggest why they are or they aren't trading. So you don't need all of them, but the more you've got, the more likely it is that you're trading. Now, there are other points that we could use to sort of build that case. We could mention that they had a loan. So it's not all financed from savings. So it's not like it's a little hobby where they're using some savings to, you know, they're retired and they're just using the savings to pass a bit of time a day because they enjoy doing up houses. They have actually took a loan out. So they've had an element of risk here. It's also connected to Colin's job, isn't it? So it told us up here that Colin is a bricklayer. So that is his trade. So he is probably able to do a lot of these things himself because he's already experienced in it and he knew how to do it properly and how to get the work done cheaply. So I'm not saying it's definitely a trade, but these are the suggestions of why it would be trading. It is a very subjective area, and the Inland Revenue would look at each case individually and make a decision on whether they thought it was trading. What I will say is if it's not a trade, they would pay capital gains tax when it was sold. Because remember, it's not their main residence. Main residence is exempt, but any investment properties, if you've got a profit there, it will be subject to capital gains tax. So if you decide that it isn't a trade, if you can argue your way through these, then you're still going to end up paying some tax. It's just a different tax. You know, trading income is subject to income tax, whereas this will be subject to capital gains tax. So that should give you enough there for sort of 10 reasonable points, I think. With these written questions, remember it's only 10 marks. We're not looking for a massive essay on this. Try and sort of keep it nice and tight, you know, short paragraphs with some headings confirming, you know, these are the rules and this is why I think they apply in this situation.